This week, wave power is coming to California. The same waves that took my picnic lunch out to sea while I was on vacation a few years ago will now generate electricity for thousands of homes.
James, I'm sorry that the ocean hurt you. A new study suggests an old study is wrong about the cost of rooftop solar to customers in California. Meanwhile, another study suggests that there's way too many studies, and a new study will outline goals on how to reduce the number of studies.
As we enter the final week of the annual UN climate talks at COP29, some of the people who put the first conferences together want to tear everything down and redesign things. For one, they have the radical idea of not having more fossil fuel lobbyists than climate negotiators at the climate conference. In fact, there's so much hot air there, it would be enough to power a hot air balloon for every single one of our Clean Energy Show listeners so they could travel carbon-free to the talks in Azerbaijan.
China has powered up the world's largest open-sea offshore solar farm. The project also includes fish farming and power for anyone who lives in a pineapple under the sea.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, air pollution in India is so dense you can't land a plane in it. That's ridiculous. A bomb cyclone is forming in the cold waters of the Pacific Northwest, and it is powerful and looks very much like a hurricane. And I go on an EV road trip to Saskatoon. It's sub-zero weather. So how are you?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to that. But before we get into the show, James, it's time to play Jeopardy.
Already? Wow.
Yes, already.
Hey, we made that 400.
The 2024 Ioniq 5 with an electric 300 miles of range. Stephanie?
What is Hyundai?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Finally, somebody got a question right on Jeopardy to do with electric vehicles or clean energy.
This is like a Jeopardy post-show podcast that I don't think those exist.
Those exist, by the way.
No, they
I was listening
know.
to one for a while.
Really?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. I guess I should not be surprised by anything, but yeah, they got it right. And is Hyundai sponsoring this? I mean, that's an odd question, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't think so. But, you know, the Ioniq 5 is one of those big selling EVs compared to the rest. Like it's entered the public consciousness, I think. But also, you know, the people that go on Jeopardy are insane, and they study for it. It becomes your job once you want to be on Jeopardy. So it isn't just people who are casual trivia people anymore. So it could be that this contestant realized that, clean energy or EV questions are starting to pop up on Jeopardy, and perhaps studied for it, which is what people do when they go on Jeopardy.
They tell you what to study for. They give you a lot of information, I think. Don't they?
I don't think so in terms of the questions. Everybody knows the categories. You kind of need to know about world history and Shakespeare and
Not
stuff.
The questions, but yeah, they kind of know the areas that they need to brush up on, right?
Yeah,
That's what
but
I thought.
I don't think they told people to brush up on EVs. I assume it's just something.
Well, if they've been listening to this podcast and you went on Jeopardy, then you bloody well know that there's a lot of EV questions for some reasons.
Yes, and this is the first time, I think, we've played these clips before. First time someone has actually got it right. So we talk about often the electrification of different categories of appliances and machineries and stuff. And I heard about a new one the other day that I didn't ever think about. And I have a relative who does ice fishing in the winter. Common thing here in Canada. You put a shack out on the lake and you drill a hole in the ice and you can do some fishing in the wintertime. But he said electric ice augers are way better than the gas-powered ones. And I'm not sure the details why, and there is probably use cases for gas ones being better.
Well, let's say you're in one of them ice huts, those shacks, those.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're a camper. You're going to be breathing the fumes of your combustion ice auger.
Well, that's one reason, yeah. But it sounded like they're more like, we know that electric motors are very good with torque. So I think the torque
was more productive.
Is really good.
It got into
more productive.
Yeah.
For drilling your hole. And maybe you need an extra battery if you're doing a lot of drilling or something. I think that would be the concern. Or if you were drilling many, many holes over many, many hours, you might need a gas-powered one. But good to hear that electric ice augers apparently are much better.
I've never done that. I've never ice fished, and I haven't even done a lot of fishing in my life, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners have.
Yeah, it sounds like an awful thing. I really don't know why anyone would do it.
Well, why they do it in the winter, I don't know, other than it's, maybe good fishing, but you don't have to freeze the fish when you get them up. Maybe it's just kind of fun to be out there in nature and kind of quiet.
And the shacks that they put on the ice, there is usually a way to heat those, like with a little wood-burning stove or something. So I think you can stay warm.
That worries me, though. Like, isn't that thin?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's just going to melt through the ice. But I don't know. People do it, and you always get nervous that it gets late in the season and people still have their ice shacks out on the ice. And, every once in a while, somebody waits too long and they're, they drive their truck out there and it goes under.
Not good. Not good. The whole thing scares me nowadays. So I went on a trip on Saturday morning to a city called Saskatoon.
Oh, Jeopardy. Wait, we got more Jeopardy to play.
You kidding me?
Back to you, Greg.
Boondoggle 1200.
In 1883, settlers from Ontario founded this city 2 provinces over. Priscilla.
What is Saskatoon?
You're right.
What is Saskatoon?
It's a berry. I think the city was named after the berry. There's a berry called the Saskatoon berry.
Oh, yes. And it should be named after Joni Mitchell, because Joni Mitchell came from Saskatoon. And there's a plaque that I saw for the first time there. I've never seen that plaque before. I guess it was put up a few years ago. Joni Mitchell, the famous folk singer from the 70s, was there for the unveiling. She's still kicking. She did a concert last summer, sitting down, but she did it.
And we have a hotel here in our city, the Empire Hotel, which is famous from the song Raised on Robbery, a Joni Mitchell song from the 60s. She talks about going to the Empire Hotel. So it's still standing. It's this really old rundown hotel. And I always want to, buy it and turn it into a boutique hotel, Joni Mitchell's Empire Hotel or something like that.
Well, you'd have to pay her money for the
I guess
phrase.
So,
But she, pause the podcast now if you're listening on Spotify and go listen to Raised on Robbery. We've mentioned it before in the show, so maybe longtime listeners have done that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to Saskatoon. It is 2.5 hours away. This is a common trip for everybody. You make it yourself monthly, it seems.
And that's the other part of Raised on Robbery that the song is about twinning the highway between Regina and Saskatoon.
Which they did, thankfully.
They're putting in a 4-lane highway.
Okay. So I'm going to a film festival in Saskatoon, and I am to moderate a panel discussion with filmmaker Lowell Dean, our friend, and some of his crew members and actors, all going to be on stage. And I have to be there. The thing starts at 11, so I had to get up really early. They didn't give me a hotel for the night before. They gave me a hotel for that night. And I knew it was going to be a long day because there's a party afterwards, and I was reuniting with all these friends that I've worked on films with before over the years, and I don't get to see Lowell a whole lot because he's a busy man making his 6th feature film, 2 this year. And I really wanted to get there. So I got up early, and I had a good night's sleep, which I was scared I wouldn't get because I did. It all worked out. But when I left, my Android Auto wasn't working. And that projects my app that I use to know my range, a better route planner, which I highly recommend with a dongle if you don't drive a Tesla and you have an EV. It is essential, and it is accurate, and it remained perfectly accurate on this trip as well. I haven't used it in sub-zero weather. This was a little bit below freezing, this weather. And first of all, that didn't work, so I had to reinstall it, and that made me a little bit late. Then when I got onto the highway was clear, but it was this foggy drizzle, this sort of little dots of moisture on the window, and everyone was driving 100 kilometers an hour instead of 10 kilometers over the 110 kilometer speed limit.
Yeah. And
I was wondering, what do they know that I don't know? Or maybe they're all drunk because it's a Sunday morning or Saturday morning from Friday night, and they're going back drunk to their hometowns. I don't know. Okay, so it's a little bit colder than usual. Usually I can make it all by myself in the car with lots of range left over in the summer if it's not windy, and I needed to do like a 5-minute top up at the halfway point. There's a Chargers at halfway point called Davidson. It's a town. So I got to Davidson, and there was somebody charging there. It was a Blazer EV, which I haven't seen before. That's the new SUV from Chevrolet. So
Yeah.
an older guy in there happily charging. So I pulled into the charger. There's 2 of them for non-Teslas and a whole bunch for Tesla. And those chargers are new, and yet they aren't compatible with Chevy. Like, I can't buy an adapter. For some reason, they're new enough, but they're not listed on the Tesla app, and they're not listed for non-Teslas for some reason.
Right. Some Tesla chargers can charge Chevys, but for some reason that one can't.
Usually the new ones can, but and this is fairly new. So for some reason that's the case. So there was 2 flow chargers, my favorite network. I just have to plug in and let it go. But I got there, and there's this little, if you're watching on video, there's this little prong that comes out that goes down to lock, and there's a little thing at the end. And so you can't pull out the connector, and it was broken. I've seen it broken on level 2, like normal sort of household type things before when you're at parking lots and things. But this was a big one that was broken. So I don't know if somebody pulled it out without pushing the button down or something. So that was broken, and I couldn't charge because it won't initiate charging. The charger and the car neither of them will let you charge unless that is locked and sealed. Because if you pull it out, the electricity could arc or something like that. It's just for safety.
Thing.
So yeah, I could not charge. I phoned Flo to report it like a good citizen. I hope that everyone who has an EV listening to our show does things like that. Also, what else did I have to do? I had to wait for the Blazer. So I pulled up behind him, and it wasn't more than a couple of minutes before he left once I did that and showed that I needed his charger. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people just need it for a little top up between the cities, and they don't do a full charge out in the country like that. So yeah, I needed to charge. So I charged up, and it worked fine. I went into the store. The co-op, which we've mentioned before for hosting these chargers, saved our lives because it was such an important location for everybody who lives in our area. Our whole province needs that because we go between the 2 cities in winter, and you need that. And they had one of those hot dog rollers,
Yeah.
but there's no hot dogs.
Those.
No hot dogs. But they had some sort of breakfast roll on there that was rolling over. I got a couple of those. Pretty good because I didn't have time to eat either. So keep in mind, I haven't even had my coffee. I just hit the road because I wanted to get there as soon as possible. And coffee was wonderful. By the way, it's a great location. And bathrooms clean and everything like that. So I got rolling, and I got back on the road, and I noticed that I was going to be only arriving at 10:55. They wanted me there at 10:30, a half hour before my event. I knew that 10:55 would probably be okay because there's an audience waiting, and all I have to do is walk up on stage. They're already going to have tested the microphones. Nobody's going to discuss what I'm going to discuss. It's my questions, and that's that. And it's always that way. I've done this a few times. And yeah, so I thought, okay. But then I had to drive fast. So I went to, when you drive fast in an EV, you use a lot more power, especially on a cold day. It's even worse when you're driving fast into a dense air and this physics of it all. So I went my maximum speed without getting a ticket, and I'm going along, and I'm about 40 minutes from Saskatoon. I hear this weird noise, and I see a display on my dash with my tire pressure going from 40, 30, 20, 10, 0.
No.
I had a flat tire.
With
no spare, and there's no spare. Is there a spare in your Teslas?
No, typically a lot of cars, our Kia Soul never had a spare.
Like even small SUVs don't have spares anymore. It's a price weight thing. They just have this air compressor, which I've never dug out before.
Yeah.
Okay. And some goo.
Yeah, you can buy a can of goo that also contains air. And
my goo comes with it. It's the compressor with the goo, but there was no instructions on how to do it.
And it could be a problem around here if it's been stored in your car and it's too cold out. The goo kind of freezes, and it's really hard for it to warm up. So did you have that problem?
No, I think it was liquid. I think it was still, I could see that it was liquid because it was a bit transparent. Now, I tried it. It did not work. But the first thing I did is I had to call my friend Lowell, who was at this festival. They were celebrating his entire body of work. It was a big day for him. And I had to break the news that he knew right away something was horribly wrong when I phoned him because, people don't phone each other these days. So, yeah, that happened. And he said, please, he's such a great guy under pressure. making films, when people come to you disappointed, he knows how to deal with that. He said, whatever you do, do not worry about that. Just take care of it. So this is a long story, Brian. This is just the beginning. Just to warn everyone, this is a bit of a story. Okay. So I did not know what to do. My manual wasn't in the car. My partner had taken the manual out of the car for some reason. And so I had to Google what the phone number was, because it's 18 months old. So we have 3 years of roadside assistance, which we had with our Toyotas as well, but never used them. But it was nice to have. It's kind of like a AAA membership. At least I thought so, or CA membership in Canada. So I phoned them on OnStar. Even though I don't have OnStar, I pushed the button at the top, got somebody and said, connect me to roadside assistance, because that's what I heard that you could do. So that happened. I got roadside assistance eventually. And they said, okay, where are you? We're showing you at this location. So that's kind of cool that they know my location without me paying any money for that service. Yeah. And so, they said, we'll send a tow truck. It could be about an hour. We're going to contact CAA, ironically, who also has subcontracted people. So they're subcontracting to a subcontractor. Anyway, long story short, they said, we're going to tow you to the Chevy dealership. And I said, fine. And then I realized later, the Chevy dealership is closed for 2 days. Why are you towing me to a Chevy dealership? So I had already phoned, because my son had a flat tire north of that city last spring. I had looked up what tire shops were open on Saturday for him. I was doing, his legwork for him remotely because he was panicking on a dirt road somewhere. And I knew what tire shops were open, that some of them, were closed on Saturday. Some of them were open and some of them closed early. So, we did that. And I found a shop. And more importantly, I found a tire for my car, because I knew it was shot, because I had tried the goo, and I knew that it was probably shot going 120 kilometers an hour, or what is it, 70 miles an hour, something like that. And so I was happy that I found a shot. I went back and I phoned them. Oh, by the way, the second I got my flat, my wife got a text saying that I had a flat. So I didn't even pull over before she phoned me. And I said, I can't talk right now. I've got a flat. She says, I know.
Because the car texted her.
Yes, the car texted her. So, if I got into a fiery car crash and the tires went flat, she would get a text, and that's reassuring. I guess she could try to phone me to get my last words, but as I died. But it's kind of morbid. But that's what happened. And anyway, she was dealing with them now, and she said that they would not tow anywhere other than a Chevy dealership. The closest Chevy dealership is what they have to do, and that's that. And they know they're closed for 2 days, and that's okay, because they're willing to take hotel receipts for up to $500, Ubers and lunch receipts beyond that, within reason, so that they don't tow me to a tire shop, but tow me to the dealership. I was so angry. I could not understand the thinking beyond that. It makes no sense. And this is apparently, I posted this on a forum. This has been going on for some time. It makes no sense at all. What happens if there was a tire shop like 3 feet away from me? It wouldn't matter. Yeah. They would tow me to the closest dealership, which was closed for the weekend. Okay. So long story long, I had to go pee about 4 times before the tow truck came. And by the 4th time, I didn't give a crap anymore. I practically walked out to the middle of the road and just let it rip, because I opened both passenger doors on the side and just peed between them, and everyone knew what I was doing. Hopefully they didn't see anything, but I was pretty darn stressed out and not happy. And maybe that made the urine come out quicker, or that giant coffee I got at the charger before. And it was 3.5 hours before they got there. I was there. I mean, it was fine. Like, I had enough range to get to Saskatoon, so it was down to like less range than I would have needed to get there, but I had hours and hours of heat in the car left. I was not a panic in any way.
Yeah, that's the good thing we've discussed many times, is even if you can just rely on the heated seats, you can keep your EV warm for literally days on end.
And after a pee or two, I was really turning seats on high to fry the fat back there, because, yeah, I was wanting to warm up again, and it wasn't that cold. I mean, it could have been a blizzard. We got a blizzard this morning, by the way, and it could have been that, and thank God it's not that. But also, I was just a bit worried because, people crash into cars on the side of the road. So I really, really pulled off the road after a while, but it took me a while before I came to my senses and got really off the road. So yeah, the tow truck driver finally came, and I told him the situation. He said, yeah, that's stupid. And yeah, but I heard of that before. So I go with this tow truck driver, listening to his country music, which I don't care for, and particularly his music and his thoughts. I did ask him a couple of tow truck questions because I read the newspapers, and there's a lot of people around here, because we're in an agricultural area, a lot of people around here die in single vehicle rollovers on gravel roads. And I said, what's up with that? And he said, well, first of all, they drive too fast and you lose control. And once you lose control, there's nothing you can do. Secondly, they don't wear their seatbelts only because there's no police there. So the only reason they're wearing seatbelts is because there could be police. It makes no sense to me. Like, I grew up in, I got my license in like 83, 84, and I've always had to wear my seatbelt. I feel naked without it. I feel like I could fly out of the car in the driveway without doing anything. Like, I just always want my seatbelt on. I don't understand that country mentality, and it's stupid. There's so many lives around here that are wasted because of that. So, and then I was worried about it being an EV because I wanted the manual to tell me what tow truck method, because they said they didn't have a flatbed. I thought it needed a flatbed, but apparently the dolly worked fine. Like, the back wheels were up, the front was up off the ground. And,
I see.
And that
they have
fine.
A dolly for the back wheels.
Yes, they have a dolly for the back wheels that they put on because, EVs, because of the regenerative braking, you can't really, spin the wheels freely. So you have to make sure that and there was the rear tire anyway that was gone. And I just had my tires rotated at the Chevy dealership in Regina, and they didn't program the TPS thing to show which tire it was. When you rotate the tire, they have to reprogram the dash so that it knows what tires. They didn't bother to do that. I can do that in my Leaf by my app, my Leaf app, not the real Leaf app.
It was indicating the wrong tire.
Yeah. No, it was indicating the wrong tire. That's correct. My wife thought it was the wrong tire that, she thought she ran over something, but it wasn't. So yeah, it was the rear passenger tire. Anyway, which was good because then when I'm trying to fill it with the inflator, which was deep down under things, under this, under that, and finally found it. And then there was no instructions for where to put the goo in the chain of events of, how you did that. So we got to the Chevy dealership, and I had a friend who was going to the festival who was late. Like, Lowell, the filmmaker, found this guy who was late there. His name is Hugh. Hugh. He was late getting there, so he was going to come rescue me if I was on the road, but he was really late. And so he found me at the dealership once I got there. We coordinated. He gave me a ride, which, thank you, Hugh. You're not listening, but thank you. He was a big lifesaver to me. And so at the dealership, I noticed there was people working in the bay there because I was going to go drop off my key. And I thought you were closed. He said, well, we're open, but we only take appointments today. And they knew about me because they were contacted. And this lovely guy who has the kindest face and the kindest demeanor took pity on me. And he said, well, we'll try and get you in. So he took me to the parts department. He said, I might have a thing, but the people who deliver tires to them only do it before noon. So they have a certain amount of people that they can connect. And it wasn't the place that I found. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there for half an hour. They're trying to find a tire. They can't. And then my ride's coming in. I said, well, can I just go to this other place and pick up the tire that I already had arranged? So my friend Hugh took me to this other shop, which was about 10 minutes away. They had the tire waiting, and it was an EV tire, and it was the right size, but it was Goodyear. It was a decent tire that I know a lot of people buy for these cars. When I'm on the forums, they recommend it. So that was great. It was $300 though. I mean, EV tires are a bit more expensive because they're low rolling resistance but the stock tires on a lot of these cars are crap. I don't know about Teslas, but I don't think they're crap on Teslas, but they're pretty crap on the non, Teslas. people really don't like them. And people have gone to great lengths to have their own spare. Like you can get a Chevy Malibu spare from a junkyard and sort of carve a place to put it in the foam in your back seat. So,
yeah, they try and keep, the price down on cars. And one way they do that is by putting cheaper tires on when they sell them.
Right. And also the most energy efficient ones so that they get the best rating. And sometimes those, are too cheap to last very long. So that's unfortunate. I don't want to discourage anyone from cars. But so, yeah, they got it back. I went to the festival and, while they were fixing the tire, and there was people on stage for the end of a film called Wolf Cop. Okay. Yeah. Remember that term, Wolf Cop. I'm going to come back to it. So I walked on stage as soon as the film had ended. We both walked right on stage and started taking questions. That ended because I was in Wolf Cop. I was an actor and he was a producer of Wolf Cop. So then we walked off stage. He drove me back to the dealership. So thankful for such a kind person that he is. And I got my car. It was already done. Already in the shop waiting for me to drive away. And the guy shook my hand and he said, I wouldn't want to be stuck in another town. And, I just immensely thanked him and I was on my way. So it was not uneventful. When I said last week, I'll probably talk about my road trip. I did not expect to be talking about all that. Okay. So then I went back to the festival. My friend Lowell Dean premiered a film called Dark Match. He's actually got 2 feature films out this year. We talked about one on previous shows, and the other is Die Alone. And it was, it was in theaters across North America, maybe some other markets as well. And so I did the Q&A for that film. So after every film, they showed like 4 of them, and after every film there was a Q&A. So instead of the festival worker doing it, they filled in for me in the morning, did a great job apparently. And then I did this Q&A, which went very well. And I'd already had a lot of the stuff explained, although I had a child actor. I've never talked to a child actor on a panel. So, but that went well. She was hilarious. She's very smart, as all child actors often are, and very witty. And so that was hilarious and good. And then we saw my son came out. My son was heading to Saskatoon too. So he left early trying to rescue his dad, but he forgot things doing that. He had to go back to school after a week off. But he came out to the film Dark Match, which I hadn't seen before. And I tell you, Brian, have you seen Dark Match? Did you consult on that
not yet.
one? It is fantastic. It is quite an achievement. Now, it's not necessarily my kind of film. I'll tell you what happens in it. It is a wrestling film in a way, because this professional wrestling group, this that does their own events in a small league, gets invited out to this rich person in the country, and it turns out to be a cult, and they have to fight for their lives, yada yada yada. It's just nonstop, and it's just so well directed and so perfectly choreographed and shot, and there's special effects at the end that are amazing. And any other time, and I said this during the Q&A when I asked the question, I said, any other time, it seems like there was a time where you could take a film like this to Hollywood and they would give you the keys to the studio, because it was just so well done, and it was funny and scary and well acted and subtle and intense and all kinds of craziness, and it ends really funny and well. And and then I got lost in the city because my GPS stopped working, and I just became frustrated. So the next morning they gave me a hotel room from this newly renovated hotel, which was a crap dive hole, but now is actually spectacular. But I just crashed. It was very nice that they gave me the hotel, but I crashed. So the next morning I needed to charge up to get back home. And I went to the charger at a Canadian Tire parking lot, which is this big mall parking lot. And there was a Burger King there. So I went through Burger King, and it was 10:35. And I said, what time do you stop serving breakfast? They said 10:30. And they said, well, we'll try and get you something. And they did. And then they gave me extra stuff because the woman thought my car was cute. I said, it's electric. She didn't care. It was cute. So I got free stuff there. And I've got a Lowell Dean story. He was in Spain. You remember we talked about this. He went to one of the biggest genre film festivals in the world, which is in Spain. And I didn't know this, but they programmed the film for 5 a.m. Can you imagine, as a filmmaker yourself, having your film programmed at 5 a.m.? I mean, it's a genre festival, so sometimes they do midnight screenings. That's very common. But 5 a.m. Now, get this, Brian. It was sold out. It was sold out, standing room only, and that's where he received the audience award for the best of the festivals from a 5 a.m. screening. And they loved it. And I just can't imagine that. I mean, we would have been horrified to know it was at 5 a.m., but then for all that to happen. And here's another thing that I bet you wouldn't believe. His special is he does a lot of practical effects, like gory stuff for, horror movies, old school 80s style gore that's not digital, but actual latex and things for wounds and things. And that person's name is Emerson Ziffel. He's a genius. He's worked on Lord of the Rings projects. Like, he has become a master of this, all from this little town that you and I live in, and working on these films.
Yeah, he did some zombie effects for me on a film one time, and you're right, he's a genius.
And the two of them walked out of their hotel in Spain and were mobbed by a group of people holding Wolf Cop DVDs, wanting signatures and autographs. And I said, you got to move there. Like, you're a god there. Nobody would care about you anywhere else. But Spain and Germany are really huge on his kind of films. Like, I couldn't believe he had no idea that was going to happen.
Wow.
The word got around, and I thought that was just an amazing story. And I was so discombobulated that I actually left my fob in the car and didn't lock it on a downtown street. And fortunately, I got in and got it because the car door didn't lock, and So anyway, I got back and everything was fine on the way back, and there was no worry about driving. A better road planner gave me zero range anxiety, and I charged for a couple of minutes at the co-op gas station again and got a little snack and a hot chocolate. And I also wanted to say that I've lost my EV car salesman. You remember when I bought the Bolt for our family here, that I was amazed that there was a person who actually owned one. And that is extremely rare, the world of buying a car from a dealership. But he's not there anymore. So now somebody else is phoning us, asking us if we want an Equinox already. And that. I was going to ask you about the Tesla stock has shot up since the U.S. election, and it's kind of artificially high, and I think you should sell. I think I would sell. I don't want to give you advice because I don't know anything about finances, and I'll never be right. Sure. If I say sell, it's probably the worst thing to do. But I have to say that I would be thinking about selling because of everything that I've heard about everything. The robotaxi thing is already baked into the price and things like that. Have you considered maybe this is a good time to go?
Yeah, no, I keep an eye on it. I always, I try and be a good investor, and I like to think that I would know when it's a good time to get out. I did actually sell it all about 8 months ago, because it just seemed to be constantly going down, but then it seemed to be turning around. So I kind of bought back into it. So yeah, I keep an eye on it, and I like to think I will know, if it turns into a bad investment, but still I'm on board so far.
Well, I think that there's a lot of hype from Tesla fanatics, and that this thinking that everything's going to be fine with the government down there. I also wanted to mention that Blue Sky, that's the social media network started by the person who started Twitter, has started this Blue Sky a few years ago now, quite a few years ago, 5 years ago. But everybody's moving there. It's like 1 million people a day, and we're there now. We've been there for some time, but we're there now, and it's wonderful. There's this thing called starter packs. So all the climate people, all the scientists, and all the non-trolls move to Blue Sky and are letting each other know. So there's this thing called a starter pack where you can say, well, we're on one called Climate Podcasters. So all the climate podcasters were on a list, and you can just follow all of them, or you can follow one for climate scientists, or weather experts, or whatever you want, or EV experts. Like there's lists and you can just get them all. And that's, the hard part about moving to the different platform is finding everybody that you want to find. And I'm sorry that my stories were so long, but I had to get it off my chest because it was a living nightmare, Brian, an absolute living nightmare. But yes, come join us on Blue Sky, search us, find us, and we'll start posting there.
Okay, so on with the show here. This is from Canary Media. California's rooftop solar is a benefit, not a cost to the state. So we've talked about this before. California had very good rules for rooftop solar. They were very encouraging of rooftop solar, and it really proliferated there in the last few years. And at some point, they got scared and they scaled it back and they stopped paying the same kind of money for contributing to the grid. And it's one of those things where you can kind of run the numbers however you feel like to sort of figure out if this is a good financial idea for the utility or not. I mean, you could look at it this way, like, look, your customers are building their own supply that's supplying the grid. You'd think that that would be a good thing. But the view that they decided to take was based on this one particular study. It's called cost shifting, and the idea being that some people can afford to put solar on their roofs, and that means the utility gets less revenue. That means theoretically that other people are going to have to start paying more. But it's never been totally clear, the math on this, and it's based on a very old study done many years ago. And anybody basically wants to kill solar for their utility just cites this study and says, okay, it's cost shifting to poorer people. This is bad. Therefore, we have to start. That's
what they did here. They scared people by saying your electricity bill will have to go up because of solar, taking off. They had to shut it down. Yeah. It was taking off so fast.
But so this article is talking about a new study that really debunks all of those. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing because there's sort of different levels to debunking it, but there's a few good paragraphs here that I'm going to read. The accounting assumes that the electricity customers use from their own solar panels should be counted as a cost to all other utility customers rather than a fair use of those panels those customers paid to install on their roofs. That assumption adds up to nearly $4 billion of this cost shift estimate. In other words, they're assuming the customer is obligated to pay the corporate utility the retail rate for power the customers generate and use themselves, and anything they do otherwise is stealing.
Wow.
This is really what they're saying. In terms of assessing who owes whom, that's little different from saying that a customer who uses less electricity by insulating their home or switching to more efficient appliances owes the utility money for the electricity they're no longer consuming.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, come on.
We're not required to buy a certain amount of electricity.
No, you are not.
In a utility. Yeah. And then there's another nice little paragraph. If you're growing vegetables in your garden, you don't pay the grocery store the retail rate for those vegetables. You own them, and you own the solar that you generate.
Absolutely.
So there's more kind of details to it, and there's different ways to debunk it in different ways. But I thought those were some nice highlights.
Well, that's very interesting. Look for the Canary Media article in your show notes. The link is there. I'm sure a lot of you will want to read that in detail because it's an issue that comes up a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous to assume that we have to pay a certain amount for electricity every month or, the utility gets mad at us. No, we could buy how much we want.
Screw you, utilities. You've got... Think about LED lights and energy efficiency across appliances and homes that have brought power consumption down in the last 10, 15 years. Well, what are you going to do? Charge more for your dishwasher because the utility doesn't get its cut? Come on.
I think the utility could make an argument about like the situation we often talk about in Australia. They have tons of solar, so there's these huge spikes when it's a sunny day. And so, you could maybe argue that too much solar might destabilize the grid, but we know that, of course, there is ways to deal with that, and Australia is dealing with it. So that's really the only argument I think they have is they just might say, oh, we don't want that much solar on the grid. It's bad for our grid. But, that's not a great argument either.
Well, I'm glad you found that story because that's very interesting to me, particularly since we had to go through that and, we have to deal with local politics here. So,
Yeah, we're grandfathered into the old program, which we get paid the same amount for power that we supply to the grid that we pay for.
well, wave power, that is ocean waves. Yes, you heard me, waves, the ones that brush against the ocean during romantic scenes in movies. Those can power electricity. Now, there is many different ways that I've seen that they can harness waves. Now, this is different also than tidal power. Tidal power is the shift of water going in and out from, say, a bay or from a coastline, and they have propellers that drive turbines underwater on the seabed underneath. Hopefully the seabed's not too deep, or maybe it's up closer to the surface where the water is flowing greater. But that is how tidal works. This is not tidal. This is the up and down motion. There's different ways of harnessing the up and down motion, but apparently it's quite powerful and something to be harvested. And I'll get to some more details later. This is in the port of Los Angeles. The story is on Electric. The show link is in your show notes there for the article. It's the company's called Eco Wave Power, and is the first of its kind in the United States. There's a couple other places in the world where the same company has set up such a system for harnessing waves. This is going to be finished by March or April, and they use floaters sort of on a hinge, and the floaters go up and down. It's a blue dinghy-like things in the water in the photo above, which you can't see here, but it'll be on our video podcast, hopefully. And they are called, they have them in Gibraltar. I guess that's one of the places. They convert the rising and falling motion of the waves into energy generation. How do they do that? Well, the movement of the floater compresses and decompresses the connected hydraulic pistons that transmit biodegradable hydraulic fluid into accumulators on land where pressure builds. So they are pumping hydraulic fluids and creating pressure. The pressure rotates a hydraulic motor, which rotates a generator, which makes electricity. So it's complicated. This isn't simple. This is one of the more complicated ways of getting power.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that explanation. It's many more steps than I was thinking it would be.
I probably don't have all of them there either. And then it goes into an inverter, converts it to AC. So after the decompression, the fluid flows back into the hydraulic fluid tank, where it is then reused by the pistons over and over again, creating a closed circular system. The kinetic energy stored in the wave is mechanically similar to wind energy, I was surprised to read.
Okay.
So that the kinetic energy is there for the harnessing. Unlike wind, waves are not intermittent. They're always happening on the ocean. Water has more mass than air, so they have that going for it. And more potential energy is in the sea. 64% of all U.S. electricity potential is in waves. So they could do 64% of the entire U.S. by putting up systems. They're not going to do that because it's not proven yet. It's not well proven, and it's certainly not cheap. But it is constant, which is important if you want, round-the-clock power. So there's more waves in winter, which is handy because that's when you get less sunshine and less shorter days in some places. So offshore wind does better in the summer. That sort of complements each other. And so co-locating wind and wave power together, having them together, is a good idea because in one season one does better and the other season the other one does better, and it all balances out. There are a lot of techniques to try and harness waves, and way too many to mention, and they're complex. But there's a lot of problems with these things, Brian, because it's the ocean. So you get algae, you get barnacles, you get very powerful waves, going up and down. So some of these times during a storm, these floater things will raise vertically and shut down, so they're not affected by the waves. So they're not damaged. It can be tough on equipment, but yeah, it's interesting to see that this is one of those things that they're doing, and it's not powering that many homes. It's small thousands, not a lot, but it is something that is a different way to ask, and it's going now. It's not on the books. They're deploying it as we speak, so it'll be complementing other renewable energies. So contact us, people. We love to hear from our listeners. Please contact us by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow and join the conversation on our Patreon page for free and get access to additional content as kind of our social media hub. And thanks to our Clean Club Executive Patreon members, Green Bastard and Ryder, Clean Club Plus members, Bob Armstrong, Wes S., and Clean Club members, Brent Routley, Sean Hines, Timo Kellenberger, and all of our supporter level members. Thank you for supporting the show and making this podcast possible.
Yes, and we have more ocean stories. And by the way, if you're listening on video, James, you can't see this, but Calypso, the clean energy cat, has graced us with her presence.
Yeah,
and
it's good luck. It's good luck. It's going to be a good show when that happens.
It's always a good show. And if you're looking on video, you get to look at the cat instead of me because she's sitting right in front of the camera.
Put cat video in the hashtags and we'll get twice the views.
Totally.
3 times.
All right. This story from Electrek. China powers up the world's largest open sea offshore solar farm. So there's lots of different ways to get energy from the ocean. Tidal is one that we just talked about. This is the first of its kind. It's an offshore solar farm that is on platforms. This is not floating. It's about 5 miles off the coast of China, and it's about 3,000 acres. There's 2,900 solar platforms, and this is the a first of its kind of project in China. There's a 66 kilovolt offshore cable paired with an onshore cable that's for high capacity, long distance transmission of this power. Once completed, it's going to generate 1.78 billion kilowatt hours of electricity annually. That's enough for about 2.67 million urban homes and could displace 500,000 tons of coal and cut down on carbon dioxide emissions by roughly 1.34 million tons annually. And we often talk on the show about agrivoltaics. Well, this is like aquavoltaics. They're also doing fish farming around the panels. And that part isn't particularly explained in the story, so I'm not sure how they integrate that. But, just because you put solar panels up in a place doesn't mean you can't do something else.
This is different than anything we've talked about because we've talked about, floating solar before.
Yeah.
But not this.
Yeah, this is on platforms. So I assume you kind of need to be in a place in the ocean where it's not too deep, so you don't have to make gigantic platforms. And judging from, the picture here, it doesn't look like it's particularly deep, but it does say that it is 5 miles off the coast. But this is a huge project and just, one of the many ways you can deploy, get energy from the ocean.
Right. Well, that's very interesting that they're actually mounting it into the ground and doing it that way. All right, COP29, the UN Climate Conference, is on in Azerbaijan, and this year it's about who will pay for developing countries to reach decarbonization goals. Last year they all agreed it should be done. Now it's who's going to pay how much and how. Kind of ironically, in COP, China is listed as one of the developing countries, but it might well be China who steps in to the place of the United States with the new administration there over the next 4 years and beyond and steps up their funding because they are, a big leader in their own decarbonization and the supplying clean energy, renewable technology to the world, including EVs. Here's a couple of headlines for you. Almost 500 carbon capture lobbyists were granted access. We talked about fossil fuel. Well, there's agricultural lobbyists, there's fossil fuel lobbyists, more than anybody else. Now there's carbon capture people too, which are basically fossil fuel people wanting to burn more fossil fuels.
Yeah, because carbon capture, while a nice idea, it really just maintains the status quo of continuing to burn fossil fuels if you think that you can capture them, which probably you can't.
There's over 1,700 coal, oil, and gas lobbyists granted access to COP29, says a report. People have studied this. There's links in your show notes. Fossil fuel-linked lobbyists outnumber delegations of almost every country. So when you send It's just disgusting. This is just frustrating as hell. Fossil fuel lobbyists are once again swarming Canada's COP29 delegation. Less than last year, but then there's less overall people allowed to the conference. But they're there. Good for you guys. And a lot of that is, the provinces. So 28 people with ties to the fossil fuel sector were given party badges by Canada. 28 fossil fuel dweebs. Last year, following Environmental Defence's initial reporting of these numbers, the Government of Canada had clarified that the fossil fuel lobbyists were included in Alberta's, that's the province with the oil in Western Canada. It was included in their list of delegates, which the federal government has no control over. Here's another headline from this week. It's, by the way, we're in the last week of this 2-week process. COP29 UN climate talks no longer fit for purpose, say experts. And the reason why is because of everything that I've just said. Is this really a climate talk, or is it fossil fuel people just trying to delay and pretend everything's okay, but delay as much as they can? There's a call for change coming after host country Azerbaijan's president, as mentioned last week, calls oil and gas a gift of God. Well, I'm sure it was, but that gift has wrecked the planet, and now we must use the gift of God that is renewable energy to stop wrecking God's planet. If you're going to thank God, then, it's his planet or her planet, and we got to save it. In a letter to the UN, senior figures say countries should not host the talks if they don't support the phase-out of fossil fuel energy. So, yeah, with 2 fossil fuel countries in a row, and next year, I believe, is Brazil. We can't do that. And it's because Russia, it's because of Putin. Putin has got his finger in everything. And he made it so that, we couldn't be in Russia. So they put it in other oil-rich countries to piss everybody off. In a letter to the UN, senior figures say countries should not host the talks if they don't support the phase-out of fossil fuel energy. Hear, hear. That came days after the BBC reported that a senior Azerbaijani official appeared to have used his role at COP29 to arrange a meeting to discuss potential fossil fuel deals. What a great place to do fossil fuel deals. This is a story that may change by the time most of our listeners get to the podcast, the conference. It's wrapping up. It's in its final week. It's not going particularly well, but it never does. So hopefully some agreements come. This is just today, Brian. Saudi Arabia is blocking the negotiations at COP29 at every level to prevent a repeat of the pledge it reluctantly agreed to a year ago at COP28 to quote-unquote transition away from fossil fuels. They don't want that anymore, and Al Gore is rightfully pissed off.
The fact that the scientists who predicted all of this decades ago or have been proven dead right should cause the rest of us to pay more attention to what they're telling us now. Do we listen to the polluters who don't want to do anything meaningful that might reduce fossil fuels, or do we listen to the scientists who have been telling us what we need to do? We just have to decide how long the world is going to cower in front of the financial and political power of the fossil fuel industry. If we can find it within ourselves in every country to come together and make intelligent choices, we can solve this. The fossil fuel industry that has spared no expense to try to capture the process, they're way better at capturing politicians than emissions. They've gotten pretty good at capturing cops, also. By the way,
if you didn't hear the last part, it was they got good at capturing politicians and cops. So yeah, they've captured this thing. Thank you, Elle, for your passion and your anger. You'd fit well on the show, and I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens next week and talk about if they came up with anything.
Yeah, well, I'm going to just top off the bad news of COP29 with some good news. This is from Electrek. The UK has stepped up with an 81% emissions cut by 2035. This is raising their previous targets. And I thought there was a couple of good quotes here from Energy Secretary Ed Miliband, who says the only way to keep British people secure today is by making Britain a clean energy superpower. And the only way we protect future generations is by working with other countries to deliver climate action. At this COP, I was pleased to announce that we're building on a reputation as a climate leader with the UK's 2035 nationally determined contributions target to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions by at least 81% on 1990 levels, and that's by 2035. So, yeah, a little bit of good news for you.
That's kind of a reaction to the Trump win, right? They're saying, hey, if they're not going to do anything, we're going to, bump up ours even greater.
Yeah, and I always love that argument about, energy security, national security. The more clean energy you have in your country, the more secure your country is. The more, the less you have to rely on potential imports from other countries. Clean energy is a way to, make your country better and secure it.
All right. Well, we've run a bit long this week. If you're watching on video, the lightning round will be a separate video, and we will conclude this now on Instagram and TikTok. But if you're on YouTube, it's going to come up. Yes, coming up next is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy and transportation.
It's air pollution season in India, Brian, and boy, are things bad this week. Air pollution levels are up as much as 130 times recommended levels. Twice would be horrific. 130 times recommended levels. I can't wrap my head around it. The pollution is so bad, some flights had to be canceled. Can you imagine? You can't land a plane because of smog. Not fog,
remember,
smog.
A few years ago, there was a volcano erupted, and there was a lot of ash in the air around Europe, and a lot of people got stranded because, a lot of flights couldn't fly because of the volcano ash. But sure, like smog, why not? Smog can get so thick to do the exact same thing. Yeah.
And even some trains. Can you imagine how bad it has to be when trains get canceled? So trains were canceled. Yeah, it's not good.
Levels of cancer-causing particles have surged far past the daily limit set by the World Health Organization. It's gotten so bad that India's Supreme Court has taken up the issue and ordered local governments to take, quote, all possible action to mitigate the problem. It's also prompted authorities to close schools and switch students to online classes.
The bad air season runs from November into January, usually each year, and is aided by cold air inversions, geography, like the mountain range that traps the air, and largely by crop burning, which is prohibited, yet still taking place. You think that would be the first thing that they would address? I don't know the logistics of that. I know that the central government is a long way from a lot of the rural regions, and they're blaming the rural governments for not cracking down.
No, and I just want to add, we're starting to have our own, air pollution season here. That's a terrible term that I'm sad that exists. But of course, we have so much forest fire smoke now in the summers that you could say that our air pollution season is the summer.
As we record this, Brian, on Tuesday midday, a bomb cyclone is developing off the coast of the U.S. Pacific Northwest and the coast of British Columbia, Canada. Fortunately, this system will not travel all the way inland because it is essentially a hurricane. It is a hurricane, essentially, in cold northern Pacific waters, very cold waters. It is quite something.
This is a really exceptional storm. This is almost unheard of, really. Now here I want to highlight, I know it gets cut off a little bit because that's where the model ends, but just look at that circulation. It almost looks like a hurricane. You wouldn't be remiss for thinking that. The pressure at the center of that storm is what you'd expect to see at the center of a Category 3 or 4 hurricane in the Atlantic. Now the wind speeds around it are going to be like a Category 1 hurricane.
These storms usually occur in the western North Atlantic due to the regular mixing of cold and warm air systems. But, the warm part of that is getting warmer and they're getting more severe. And also the pressure of the low pressure system drops extremely fast. That's what a bomb cyclone is and it's like a Category 3 or 4. The pressure in the center of this cyclone is like but the winds are only a Category 1. Fortunately, it's not really coming on land but it will affect land. The owner of the social media platform X posted a video about how we have to go through an extinction event to become stronger. So, Brian, my predictions about this guy are all coming true, that climate change is not going to be an important thing. He wants us to go through it and become extinct. Joe Biden will announce new conservation efforts and funding when he becomes the first sitting U.S. president to visit the Amazon on Sunday. And you can see more on Bloomberg. No link that I can provide you, unfortunately. Oh, it's time for a CES Fast Fact. U.S. oil companies started getting subsidies in 1913. Did you know that?
No.
Ford was then making the Model T. That's 111 years of subsidies for oil and gas. You're welcome. Next time someone complains about EV or battery factory subsidies, bring that up. The global energy sector added over 2.5 million new workers in 2023 last year. Now, while around 2/3 of those jobs were in clean energy, the number of fossil fuel positions also continued to rise slightly. Chris Wright, Trump's nominee to run the Department of Energy, calls climate change a religion and the left's justification for top-down control. That's the nominee for the Department of Energy, which affects a lot of what we talk about. It's not just oil and gas, it's other kinds of energy and not good. In the United States, solar is held back more by red tape than it's helped by subsidies. Rooftop solar there in the United States is 3 to 4 times as expensive as some other parts of the world. Not Canada, of course. We're kind of like the United States. North Americans pay more per watt in solar subsidies than the rest of the world pays in total to get the solar going. You know, our subsidies are what are supposed to just bump us up, but that's what the whole cost is elsewhere because of red tape. This is from Yale Environment. Brazil wants to develop a bioeconomy in the Amazon with rural communities sustainably harvesting foods to be sold on the international market. A fully developed Amazon bioeconomy could employ nearly 1 million people. And we have a link to that story from Yale Environment. More than 1/3 of the world's commercial shipping capacity carries fossil fuels. We've said that a lot, but here's the numbers. 13,000 oil tankers. That's a lot of oil tankers. I wouldn't have thought that there'd be even 1,000, let alone 13. 3,000 LNG, LPG tankers, and $2,500 bulk carriers transporting coal still. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans see themselves switching to an EV within 10 years, according to a new study. Green Car Report says that, link in your show notes. Bloomberg NEF projects that global EV sales, including both battery electric and plug-in hybrids, will grow to 16.7 million units by the end of this year. That is compared to just 13.9 million last year. I mean, it's not a doubling or anything, but it's still a significant rise. And when we started this podcast, which is coming up nearly 5 years ago, it was only 2 million per year that they were selling. But even that we were pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
Because it was up from 1 million.
2 million up to now 16.7 million this year. That's pretty big.
So that's 16.7 million non-gas using cars that are replacing other ones. Battery maker in China, CATL's chairman, is open to a U.S. battery plant as long as Trump lets China join in its EV supply chain. We'll see about that. Electric had that story. Bulawayo, the city of 700,000 in Zimbabwe, may run out of piped water by the end of the year. These are stories that we're going to see more often with climate change.
Yeah, that's not a good situation. We have tons of fresh water here in Canada, so we tend to not think about those kinds of things.
And finally this week, China just connected its largest single-capacity solar farm built on former coal mining area, which is in the Gobi Desert, to the grid. It's connected to the grid, 3 gigawatts, which is 3 nuclear reactors at peak output. It's in the Gobi Desert. And the solar farm could power 2 million households, which is a pretty big city. This huge project will save about 1.71 million tons of standard coal each year and cut carbon dioxide emissions by roughly 4.7 million tons. China's solar and wind power generation growth exceeded total power demand growth in October, showing how the clean energy boom is driving power sector emissions to peak in China and not go up any further, Brian.
Yes, desert solar, that's something we've talked about before. And that is our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. You can join our Patreon community for free to get more posts. That's a great home for the show there on Patreon. And you can support us with a purchase from the merch store that's listed in the show notes or on the website. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to hit the follow button for us to follow the podcast on your podcast app.
Thank you to all of our Patreon members again, and Apple Podcast subscribers and YouTube membership holders for supporting our show. Join Patreon today as a paying member and get access to exclusive bonus content and bonus episodes, including ad-free episodes, exclusive access to the Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts on our merch, early access to our episodes, behind-the-scenes material, private updates, thank you credits on our video podcasts, and shout-outs like you heard earlier on our audio podcast. So, thanks again. We'll see you in 7 days if the world is still here.
See you next week.